Welcome to the Cashflow Ninja, the podcast sharing how to create and grow income streams and manage, multiply, and protect your wealth in the new economy. Are you tired of trading your time for money? Do you desire freedom today instead of retirement in 10, 20, or 30 years? I'm MC Laubscher, and this is the Cashflow Ninja. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Ninja. I have got a great show for you today. In today's show, we're going to look at a holistic wealth framework. I'm joined by my great friend, Dave Wolcott. Dave Wolcott is an entrepreneur, a business owner, and an investor. Dave, always pleasure to see you, my friend.
Hey, MC. Awesome to be here in person, live with you, and to connect with your listeners again.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And by the way, you were part of the PodMax event that was at the studios. How did you like that?
I thought PodMax was a phenomenal opportunity for not only the guests who had arrived, but all of the shows, right, to increase exposure across different platforms. Phenomenal event, and hang out with like-minded people was excellent.
How was that networking? That was
It was phenomenal. I love how we're creating something like that again, right? Being in person. I mean, that's what this business is all about. It's connecting with people meaningfully. So the chance to do that in person is excellent.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And Dave came out the night before too, which we had an event, my meetup group, and he spoke at the meetup group about some of the topics that we're going to get into today, which was fantastic. So it was great to see you speak there, and the folks really enjoyed you. PodMax was a blast. How good was that networking afterwards?
It was really good. And we didn't mention the drinks either.
No. Podcast After Dark, as Eric Cabral calls it. So you were on the show before. That was a lot of fun, and I got so much good feedback from that show about what we talked about a little bit. But for folks that might not be familiar with that episode, by the way, if you've not checked it out, just go to cashflowninja.com, type in Dave Wolcott, and definitely check out that episode. But for folks not familiar with you and what you do, can you please share a little bit about your background and journey with them?
Absolutely, MC. So, I'll just give kind of a brief background. We covered more of it in the past, but really, I grew up like a lot of listeners, right? Which was growing up in middle class. It was pounded into my head that, go to school and get good grades was really the recipe for success, right? Unless you were some child prodigy and were a basketball star or a musician or something like that. So I forged down that path, really got into college. From there, went into the Marine Corps. I did the ROTC program. Phenomenal opportunity to serve my country, work with some other really dedicated, hard-charging people. And what I found in the military that was amazing as well is that sense of purpose, right? It was a really, really great sense of purpose that when I moved into the corporate world, I really kind of lost that, kind of just felt as a cog in the machine. So I was kind of looking past that and trying to figure out, what could be the answer, right? How could I live the best version of myself? And I, like many others, had the opportunity to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was really a pivotal time for me because I was able to just change the construct, really, right? And see how does the world really work. But the book really didn't have a playbook. Right? It just gave you theoretically, hey, this is the cash flow quadrant. If you work on this, right, you can be going down a different path. So what I did, being kind of the entrepreneur, is really I tried to challenge the question of how do you really build wealth? Right? And problem solve that. What is it? So I set on this quest to learn as much as I could, increase my financial IQ, constantly reading books. This was even before the podcast days, about 20 years ago. There's so many great resources out there today, but it was really just opening up my mind to the different possibilities of, how to build wealth and what does wealth really mean.
One of the things that you just said that is something that I thought about too is you mentioned the word purpose, right? And if you look at why people die, is one of the top reasons, I think it's the number one reason, is lack of purpose, right?
Yes.
Then it's lack of relationships because everyone around them has passed, and then they money is, I think, is number 3 or something.
Right.
If you look at it, so it was just so interesting that you said that too, because it gave me purpose, and then I slightly lost purpose again, but I found it. What were some of the other things in the military and lessons learned from it that has contributed to the success in business and investing that you've had?
I think there's a real, ability to test yourself in ways you hadn't even thought about before. I always used to say that, until you've been under fire in combat, then, that's really the true makeup of what a person is really like, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see what happens. And typically in corporate America, when I saw, having a career there, right, people would, stab their friend in the back to get the next promotion or kind of move ahead, right? You wouldn't find that in the military, especially the Marine Corps, for sure, right? So integrity is critical. I think challenging yourself personally, also bringing that physical sense into it. I think even Robert Kiyosaki said the Marine Corps was one of the most spiritual organizations he had ever been in. Right, because of that sense of purpose and things. So I think there were some phenomenal lessons learned there, and that I was able to translate into my professional background moving forward.
The 1% grow their business and investments every year, regardless of the economy and marketplace, and pay very little or no taxes legally. Besides having the right mindset, elite strategies and tactics, and the council of elite wealth advisors, coaches, and mentors, they have access to opportunities that the rest of the population do not. If you're an accredited investor, we have a network that provides Cashflow Ninja listeners access to exclusive business and investment opportunities. To join our investors network, please apply at cashflowninjainvestorsnetwork.com. That's cashflowninjainvestorsnetwork.com. Yeah, it's you bring up such a good point. It's got to be just strange when folks return and they've seen combat, they've been in combat, somebody's shooting at you, and then you go into corporate America and someone is, like you said, backstabbing his buddy to get the promotion, or somebody, crying because their boss is mean to them, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a whole different world.
It's two completely different worlds. So one of the things is your background is you're a consultant. So you always look for patterns and frameworks and so forth. And you've been in the syndication business for a little bit, which we're going to jump into when we look at the overall framework too. But what were some of the things that stood out for you? Because there are a lot of folks that's successful, and you and I have chatted about this, successful clients or successful investors. And then there are some folks that are less successful. What are some of the things that you saw?
Right. I thought it was really fascinating that it was part of my plan to build this syndication business to really try to educate others, right, on how to build wealth really from a holistic perspective and, contrary to conventional wisdom and everything that's being espoused by Wall Street.
Yeah.
So in that journey for the past year and a half and talking to many different investors, it was really fascinating, right, to understand, why is it that, some investors, once they're educated, they can realize that there's a completely different strategy, a different investment thesis, and they invest wholeheartedly. They've changed their strategy. I have one investor, he changed his entire strategy within 90 days, repositioned his entire portfolio. I mean, really massively, and has done super well. He is a strategic coach attendee, by the way. And then I have other investors. A good friend of mine, for instance, I've known for over 15 years. He has over $200K sitting in a cash account, and he's not interested in investing in something like a real estate syndication because they invested in single family in the past and it didn't turn out too well, right?
Gotcha.
So it's partially these limiting beliefs. It's experiences from the past that people have, and also, Warren Buffett talks about it all the time, right? You reduce risk based on your knowledge of what you know. right? So people just don't understand this. And the reason why no one has heard about, real estate syndications is because Wall Street wants it that way. Right. Go ask your financial planner, right, if there's this other opportunity, right, to grow your wealth that's, non-correlated to the market. And MC, I mean, this is a really timely meeting, right? We have to talk about what just happened last week. The Dow down 3,600 points with the coronavirus. Bounced back a little bit yesterday. Now it's down again today as before. But I got to tell you, I don't watch the market anymore. No. Right? I mean, when you're investing in assets like real estate, people need a place to live. Right. And you do that in highly correlated job markets, population growth. I mean, people still are going to live somewhere. Right. And who wants the uncertainty of your future, right, tied to something as random as some virus that just broke out, right?
On the other side of the world, It's it's funny. Somebody actually asked me too. So, what do you think of the markets? And I said, I don't think about it.
Right.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, because the strategy is, markets go up, down, and sideways. If you have a great, solid strategy, it should work in all three. The tactics vary, but it should be able to work in all three of them, right?
Exactly.
So let's jump into this framework, because one of the things that is so fascinating about money to me, it's fascinating. When we think about health, right? We all know that you need to eat healthy, you need to sleep, recover, and you need to work out, right? That's basically, and you need to hydrate, obviously, and recover, right? But that's basically, if you follow that quick little blueprint, you're going to be okay, relatively, right? If you work out a lot, but you eat very poorly, it's just not going to work. Your health is not going to be optimal. But yet, when it comes to money, it's just fascinating that the majority of people focus, let's just say, even if they save 10% per year, which they don't. Most people do not save 10% per year. But let's hypothetically, let's conservatively say people save 10% per year. Then they take that 10% and they try to multiply that money in the markets. And that's the strategy. But what about the 90% of everything else, all the mechanics, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the overall framework, which I love, of the strategy, and maybe start with one of the first pillars of this framework.
Right. So it's really a holistic view of building wealth, through all of my learnings and education and trying to talk to other investors and try to explain that this is really an alternative investment thesis, right? The typical Wall Street version is to amass a certain amount of money, right? By the time you're, let's say, 65 at retirement age, then you start making your withdrawals at 4% a year. So you start killing your golden goose. You have no tax deductions at that point. You're paying capital gains on the highest amount. They typically don't tell you that there's getting fees, assets under management fees, that are eating into that as well. And gosh, what if you have a market correction like we just did, and you're 65 or 70, right? And you don't actually have the time. So this framework is really what the wealthy have been doing for many, many years, right? Yep. And the first part of it that I would describe really is that it all really starts with yourself, right? And you as a person, and what is your vision statement? A question I love to ask people initially is, if you had all the money in the world, where would you be? Who would you be with? And what would you be doing? Right? It's a really introspective question, because a lot of people think about money all the time as I need money for this, I need money for that. But in reality, right, what type of life do you want to live? What is the best version of yourself? And maybe some of those things don't even involve money, right? It could be like increasing the relationship with your kids or your family or friends, right? And you can start doing that today, but not until you've created this vision statement for yourself and then put actionable goals in place and start building habits to really achieve that. So from the framework perspective, I really like to start as an overarching thing with establishing that vision for yourself and what that really means to you. I think that's the first place to start. And then we move into 3 different phases from there.
My friend Brian Page has created a cash flow machine generating over $100,000 in 6 months without owning any real estate. His system consists out of renting properties from property owners and renting them out on Airbnb. His system is so simplistic, it can be managed by virtual assistants and yet so effective and powerful that it predictably generates cash flow every month. Brian and I are hosting a webinar where he shares his system and how it generated over $100,000 in 6 months for him personally. You can access this life-changing webinar at cashflowninja.com/BNB. This is one of the greatest cash flow opportunities I've seen since I've started my podcast. Again, the URL is cashflowninja.com/BNB.
That is the most crucial part, by the way, because I get a lot of questions. MC, is this a good investment? Should I be investing in this? And I usually respond, well, what are you looking to accomplish? Where are you going? It would be the same thing as you and I just jump in a car right now and say, okay, let's go. You would say, well, buddy, where are we going? And it could be New York, just up there, or we could do a cross-country drive to Los Angeles, but you would like to know where we're going. And I think it's the same thing. So is this X a good investment? Is Y? Well, what are you looking to accomplish? Which then takes us to the second pillar.
Right. So, so again, just kind of expanding on this first phase, right, where it's from a mindset perspective, I think part of that is really overcoming some of those beliefs, right, that could be negatively impacting you in terms of what you could potentially achieve. I think health is just, so important. Is your health actually energizing you, right, to achieve the goals that you want, or is it inhibiting you? Right. Yeah. A lot of people are being held back because they're having health issues. And obviously, the more you age, you just, you hear about it, your friends having different issues and things like that. But if you focus and invest on yourself, you should expect an exponential return. I mean, I typically look at every minute or every dollar that I invest in myself, I expect a 10x return. And to this day, my highest paying ROI has been investments in myself. Right. So I think the investor looks at that type of mindset, which says, hey, if I do this additional, training or education or read this book in my free time, I'm going to become that much more knowledgeable to create that much more value versus the cost of, what it costs to do that. Right. I mean, taxes are the same thing, right? People say, oh, I'll just do it on TurboTax, or the lady who's been doing it for 20 years can keep doing that. It only cost me $2,000, but well, you're missing the big picture. So I think the mindset is really critical. And as we really move from there, right, it's now that you have an open mindset, you're able to grasp and embrace these new ideas around your financial IQ, your mindset IQ, and also your health IQ, right? Yep. But if you can't get past that first part, like I have so many investors I've talked to, they're not even open to a new idea because of things that they've heard, right, from conventional wisdom and Wall Street and everything, right? So, but once you're able to open your mind, you can look at these other things, right, and really start to get educated, and then make an informed decision for yourself that, wow, there could be another way. This is really powerful.
There's so many things that people hear, and initially they just go, no, that's not right. One example is very wealthy people make more money every year, and they pay less taxes, almost no taxes. No, that can't be true. We talk about other different ideas that people have that initially there's a pushback. No, there's just no way. There's just, because they haven't changed that mindset yet. So it's crucial to start here, because that leads into, what I just touched on, tax strategy first, the next pillar, right? But that ties into these type of ideas that you share. If you don't have those first two building blocks in place, it's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think it is really important, the progression, right, of how you learn these things. Yep. But as you start to learn that there's other different investment types, different asset classes that you could invest in different strategies, and now you've set your vision in place, you can start to learn these things. I mean, people don't realize that, taxes are the number one biggest wealth destroyer. It is your biggest expense that you have in life. Whatever age you are, right? Well, I guess unless you're under 18. But, so doesn't that warrant investing in learning different strategies, right, around, tax efficient type of, investments, or structuring yourself, in a tax efficient manner? And Tom Wheelwright, does a phenomenal job in his book. If you haven't read that book, I always highly recommend this book. Tax-Free Wealth is his book, and he really talks about that the tax code is actually a roadmap to wealth. It's really a series of incentives, right? So for real estate, for instance, if we're investing in an apartment building, the reason why you're able to get tax efficiency through that is because you're providing housing to people who need it. Right. So it's nice because you're investing in a kind of a charitable and a giving way, helping people and communities. And at the same time, that that's why you're able to receive those tax breaks. Typically, people just think about taxes from the standpoint that I need to get taxed because I have a W-2 job and I'm just paying my fair share. Right. But when you start, as Robert Kiyosaki talks about in the cash flow quadrant, if you're on the business side, in the investor side, you can really start to take advantage of some significant tax savings. And MC, I mean, let's add this as well. I mean, people are always chasing yield. Right? I mean, we're all trained to do that. This investment is 8%. That one's 15. That one's 19. It must be better. Right.
Right.
But just think if you could save conservatively 10%, 15% off of your taxes, off the bottom line.
It's a multiplier.
Right? It's a huge multiplier. Exactly.
Yep. And that's the important thing about new ideas, tax strategy, infinite banking, and so forth, that those are multipliers. Because if you, like you just said, reduce your taxes by 10 to 20% and put it in a safe vehicle, for example, that you don't lose any more money, to now invest for cash flow in appreciating assets, and people are going to need a place to live. It's a game changer.
For sure. And you bring up infinite banking. I mean, one of my favorite vehicles. Again, a lot of people don't understand what this is. I had fun talking to a financial planner the other day and asked him, what he thought about whole life dividend paying insurance policies, and he said, "Oh well, we don't provide that. That's too risky. We don't think we don't have that in our portfolio." And really, what he's really saying is they don't sell it,
right?
So they're not going to tell you that that's good advice to have, right? Because there's no incentive there. So, but the phenomenal thing really about the infinite banking construct, right? If you're not familiar with this, it's this concept of taking $1 and getting multiple returns, doing multiple things with the same dollar, right? So you invest into this policy, the money grows tax-free over the long term. It's passed on to your heirs tax-free with no probate or anything. It's also a nice way from an asset protection standpoint, right? It is considered within your life insurance policy, right? So so creditors aren't really looking at life insurance, right? So you have some protection from that standpoint. And then the favorite thing that I really like about this is, you're actually able to get liquidity from this, right? So you can borrow policies typically 80 to 90% of the cash value that you put into the policy, right? So now when we talk about this holistic framework and you say, hey, I just received a bonus this year, right? What am I going to do with that, right? You want velocity on your money. So take that money, put it into your infinite banking policy, right? So there it's growing, say roughly a 6% return. And then you wait for that next opportunity to come out. And now you leverage against that, and you're making maybe making something off of the spread, right, through that arbitrage there. Plus, you're still getting all of the benefits that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Right? And now you're investing in another asset class, right? So that's where bringing all these things together is just really exponential. But I love that liquidity standpoint from just always having your money working for you, always having some velocity to it, right? And then, having that flexibility. That's my sleep at night money, right? Too. Yep. Whereas, if something happened, God forbid there was a, health concern or whatever it might be, I know I have money right there that I can get within 24 to 48 hours. And in the meantime, it's working for me.
MC Laubscher, the creator of the Cashflow Ninja and Cashflow Coach at Producers Wealth, where we help our clients integrate infinite banking with their business and investments. To learn how you can create your own banking system to turbocharge your investments and business in 30 days or less, go to yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on one of the pieces of it, which is so important to have down too, is your estate planning.
Yes.
Another one of the cornerstones. And then if you want to touch on that, and then also talk about building your dream team and establishing a dream team.
For sure. Estate planning, I think there's a lot of lawyers out there that, talk about this. A lot of folks talk about it. It's kind of a necessary. I think it's not really fun, right?
No.
I remember, several iterations of putting together a will with my wife, and it's not a fun time. Let's put it that way. But challenge yourself, put it out as a goal. But you need to have some proper estate planning in place, especially if you want to build your wealth. Right. I unfortunately, I know some people who have lost wealth, right, because their assets were not protected. And the more wealth you bring, you do get more exposure, right, as the kind of years go by, and the evolution of that can open you up to some things. So I think it's always critical to have the right asset protection in place to protect yourself, protect your family. So obviously, I call it building a fortress around your wealth, right, is kind of the way to look at it. So a key component there. And then as part of this, right, this whole thing we talk about in phase 2, it's really building a dream team. I'm not the guy who's going to, advise you on what's the best asset protection strategy to put in place, right? But once you have the right attorney, right, estate planning attorney who can help you do that, you have a life insurance, right, only a top-notch qualified person, right, who knows how to build these things properly, right? You have someone like that on your team. I include my doctor on my team, right, who specializes in integrative medicine, right, which I think is a very kind of holistic way to look at your health. Those are key things. Your tax advisor, obviously key player on your team. So as you can bring all these different people together, right, you're going to get more leverage through the power of the knowledge that they have, right? And then also help to build you this strategy that's much more customized for you. Whatever age you are, what your goals are, what your family picture looks like. It's key to just, structure that around there.
Yep, absolutely. And this is the most important foundational building blocks. But just think about the worldview that you have and what you're going to do in your business or in your investments. If you have tax strategy in place, reducing your taxes by 10 to 20%, if you have a family bank or a business bank through your infinite banking concept and your strategy, your life insurance policy, if you have estate planning. So there's a peace of mind knowing that if something happens to you, that's taken care of, the money's in a safe place, and you're now reducing taxes. Now you're going on to the next phase to obviously repositioning some assets with this dream team, and maybe you'll lead us into that and talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. That is really the third phase that we get to, which is really taking action. Right now, you've built this infrastructure in place. You've kind of become educated, right, on the different things that are out there, alternative to, again, what conventional wisdom is preaching. And we find that, 90% of Americans have their assets in two places. They're in qualified plans, 401ks, IRAs, in the market somehow, or it's in trapped equity in the house. Right. And I always love to point this out to folks that what is the rate of return on equity in your house?
Yeah, always zero.
It's zero, right? It's always zero. I met a friend of mine who had a nice liquidity event. He was lucky enough to sell his business and, went on to actually pay off the house because they didn't want to have a mortgage, right? But if you leverage this strategy, you would actually get as much money, especially with where rates are today, right? Yep. You would leverage up your house, your existing house. You'd have a bigger deduction, yep, right, on your taxes. You'd take that money and then invest it into something like, real estate syndications, putting it into your life insurance policy, right? And then the cash flow from those would actually pay the debt service on that. And then meanwhile, you've got, you're making maybe 10 to 15% return on your equity.
Yeah.
Right? So you could wipe out your house if you needed to. Yep. So what is this concept of paying off your house, right? But it's really because, again, the size of the financial industry and what we've all been taught, right? So, I understand where it comes from, and I know your listeners here are pretty sophisticated, right? And that's what brings them here, is to find new ideas, right, and new ways to accomplish things.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's then obviously a big part that people should take action, right, which is that third phase. So this is where, in my opinion, I could see a lot of people setting all this up, but this is where they get stuck, right, of actually doing it. And you just basically said, one person that did all of this in 90 days, this asset repositioning, everything, started investing. And then there's some folks sitting on it for a while, right? Not taking action.
Exactly. And, I'm not an advisor, right? I can't provide advice.
Yep.
But what I can do is I can offer you education, right, to learn about some of this alternative strategy. And it's really an alternative investment thesis. And we say alternative, but it's just because you haven't heard about it. But I guarantee you the wealthy, if you have 5, 10 million and more, yep, they understand how all of this works. Right. Yep. And they've been doing this for years, back when the Rockefellers, right? So I encourage you to learn more, explore more about this, and get yourself educated so you can make an informed decision, right? And then once you do that, you start to realize that, hey, my financial planner is only telling me I've got a 7% projection. Don't worry about the market. It dropped 3,600 points last week, but over the long haul, you'll make 7%. Right. But again, they're not always telling you about what's your tax bracket going to be when you retire, right? You're not going to have deductions. What is the impact of the assets under management fees that they're charging you, right? But when we can kind of look at these strategies and you put all of these things in place, it's a real game changer, and it's just been phenomenal to watch, how people are changing their lives, yeah, and how much more opportunity that they see for themselves by creating really a different framework and strategy that's going to move the needle more than 7%.
Life settlement investments have allowed financial and banking institutions to not only buy their equity contractually, but also diversify their capital from any economic, market, and geopolitical risk. It's been part of the billion-dollar blueprint followed by institutional investors. And if you're an accredited investor, you can also now participate in this vehicle with enormous growth potential. You can watch an informational webinar presented by one of the premier organizations providing life settlement investments, Penumbra Solutions, at cashflowninja.com/life settlements.
Oh, yeah. And I love what you said, too, about the average rate of return. It just cracks me up, too. Oh, that is sold, right, by Wall Street. Right. Well, the average rate of return, if you just leave your money in here long enough, is going to be 8% or 7%, whatever they're selling these days. And I always just joke and say the average rate of return, if you and I had 50, or let's just say we had $100, right, and we lose 50% of our money. Now we have 50, and then we make 100% on our money. Well, now we're back to $100, right? And we haven't even talked about the fees and commissions and all that kind of stuff. But the average rate of return there is 25%, because in 2 years, yes, you had $50, you made 100%, right? And then you lost. So it's just so funny to me. But so this is definitely alternative. And an alternative strategy to a lot of folks that might not be familiar, that there are other routes to take. The one thing that I also want to mention, Dave, is that let's go back to the beginning, our vision. And I want Dave, and Dave is great with this. This is someone that eats his own cooking and he doesn't throw up. So he actually does what he teaches, and this is why he's such a great teacher. If you don't mind sharing just how that vision that you had led you to make an investment, to get to your dream, right, of where you wanted to live. And who you wanted to spend time with, if you could give us an example of that, because you've got a fantastic one.
No, absolutely, MC. So my wife and I, was part of our dream to have a house in Italy, and to not be a tourist there, but to learn the culture, to learn the language, and to really get indoctrinated into the culture. So we had that vision for ourselves, and over time, what we were able to do is we purchased a property, our first one, which was probably about 9 years ago now. We used the passive income coming off of one of our real estate properties here that pays for the mortgage over there. We're able to do a family retreat once a year, so we go over there. Our travel expenses are tax deductible because we're going to see our asset. And the other phenomenal benefit is that we have our kids in the business, right? And we've been teaching the kids this same strategy, and to see them kind of grow and understand this alternative strategy right now is amazing. We just got my daughter her first life insurance policy, and she's set up there. She's interested in investing in real estate as well. So again, this is kind of an example, right, where we set up our vision of what we saw, would be great for us. And then by putting these different components in place, we're able to realize that.
It's fantastic. And teaching your children how you were able to do that, and now you're transferring that knowledge over. And you're a lifelong learner. We talk a lot about the things that we're learning and so forth. What have you been studying and learning lately?
The thing that I'm most reading right now is Brendon Burchard's book, High Performance Habits, which I find is really fascinating. There's this interesting concept, too, I'm kind of just thinking about, too, which is internal drive and external drive. And I think I've always been born with an internal drive, being, very motivated internally, don't really need anyone to tell me, what to be done. But it's fascinating when you can add internal drive to external drive, right? And you get also that social impact, right, of where you can go. So I'm constantly being motivated and inspired by my investors.
Yep.
It's just amazing to see the progress that they're making. And again, just real, life-changing impact when you start to forecast out, your life and your family's vision. And it's, all of a sudden going from 7%, right, up to something exponential. It's super rewarding. So I love always reading mindset books and studying and trying to improve myself and what I can learn, and then how can I share that with others to help others as well.
Yeah, it's amazing to see to make an impact in other lives too. And as you mentioned, it keeps on motivating you, right, and contributes to the purpose that you have.
Exactly.
No, it's fantastic stuff. So this holistic framework, the Pantheon Holistic Wealth Framework, this is an ebook that you've put together, and it's a fascinating read. Where can folks get a hold of this ebook, and where can they learn more about you, where can they follow you?
Thanks, MC. Really easy. Just go to our website, which is pantheoninvest.com. And for the ebook strategy, you can download a free copy of it, which is Pantheon Invest wealth-strategy.com.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a blast having you on the show again, coming out here in person too.
100% MC. Really appreciate it, and grateful for the opportunity to speak with you and also the awesome listeners. And I think it is important, right? Because, your listeners, and I love your show, right? Because it's really a series of case studies if you think about it.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many interesting people who've come on. They have different perspectives and all within that alternative lens, right?
Yep.
So having the ability to hear those success stories and then for yourself to kind of formulate, hey, what makes sense for me, right? I really want to invest in that because it's fascinating and motivating to me, right? What can I tie to? So I applaud you for putting that out there and bringing in such great guests, and honored to be here.
Thank you so much. As always, you just provide so much value, and this has been a blast. Thank you, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.